Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to talk about something a little different. I've taken you guys through the journey of flight school. I've taken you guys through the journey of progression. We're going to start a new series where we dive into all aviation topics. It'll be called my Table Talk series. So what I will try to cover is any topic that could arise when you are having a discussion with an IP before a flight or after a flight doing table talk, right? Today we are going to talk about the Stabilator. Obviously that is a piece of equipment on the UH60 because I am a 60 pilot. We'll have a range of topics we discuss in this series: pubs and regs, aerodynamics, systems. Just keep in mind these systems will be geared towards Blackhawks because it's what I know, and ATM and various other topics. So not that long ago I was in RL3 progression, and it was one of my very first flights, and the IP I had that day slapped his hand up on the Stabilator and he said, "Hey, can you tell me what this is?" And I said, "Yeah, that's the Stabilator." And deep down inside in my own head, I was thinking, oh God, I haven't looked at the functions of this thing since flight school. I know it scalps, but I don't know what the hell any of those things stand for anymore. I know the first one is streamlines with downwash, but what are the other four that he's about to ask me about? And he said, "Okay, cool, can you tell me what it does?" And I said, "Well, it enhances the handling qualities of the aircraft." And he said, "Yeah, that's close, but in what axis?" And then I was like, oh no. I think I fumbled my way through it. He then was like, have you ever heard of scalps? Well, give me some functions of it. And I'm like, the S is streamlines with rotor downwash. And he's like, okay, well, what's the C? And I'm like, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. Anyways, where I'm going with this story is we've all had that moment before where we just did not focus our studying on what exactly the IP was going to ask that day, because there's such a wide range of knowledge. And that is what this series aims to cover, is those topics that are commonly talked about that you can come to my channel and reference really quickly. So today we are going to dive in the functions of the Stabilator on the UH60. So if you've never been asked what the Stabilator is, it's only a matter of time before you will be asked what the Stabilator is. And if you haven't already studied the Stabilator, we break it into an acronym called SCALP. So SCALP stands for Streamlines with, Collective Coupling to minimize pitch attitude excursions, Angle of incidence decreases, Lateral side slip to pitch coupling, and then pitch rate feedback to improve dynamic stability. But what does that actually mean, right? And today I'm going to try to get into that and break down a lot of those terms I just said. If your IP ever asks you, what is the Stabilator, or what does the Stabilator do for the aircraft, the Dash 10 has a very simple definition, and I'll read it straight out of the Dash 10. So it says, the variable angle of incident Stabilator enhances handling qualities in the pitch axis in forward flight. Plain and simple, that is the definition of what the Stabilator does. Most IPs want more than that. They'll typically go, oh, okay, good job. That's what I was looking for. But just like any IP, they will typically prod for a more deeper level of understanding. So let's get into the first one. Going to be the S. So that is streamlined with rotor downwash. So the best way to describe this is when you are at low speeds, below 30 knots, or at a hover, if my iPad is going to be the stabilator in this situation. So the stabilator will be like this to streamline with the rotor downwash coming down. So it will go with the downwash rather than against it. If it were to program up and the downwash were to be coming straight down on the stabilator, it would be more like a paddle, which would cause like an extreme nose up attitude. So if you were hovering and that stabilator was like a paddle and it was flat instead of streamlining with, your attitude would look like this rather than what it actually looks like, which is more like that in a Blackhawk. Had to steal my son's red toy helicopter. It was the only good one I had in the house because he's torn all the other ones up. So that one's pretty easy to understand. The next one we're going to get into is the C. So that one is collective coupling to minimize pitch attitude excursions due to collective inputs. So that one's a little harder to understand, and the best way to understand this one is funny enough, it's not actually in the stabilator section of the Dash 10. I actually went to the MMU section, or the mechanical mixing unit section of the Dash 10, and I found collective to pitch, and I'll read it for you guys. So it talks about the collective pitch mixing compensates for the effects of change in rotor downwash on the stabilator caused by collective pitch changes. The mixing unit provides forward input on the main rotor as collective is increased and aft input as the collective is decreased. So what that basically means is it's very similar to the S, right? Streamlines with. So the major difference is this one is talking about when you are at speeds above 30 knots. So the streamlines with is at hover flight or slow flight below 30 knots. The collective coupling is above 30 knots. So the best way to describe this function in an example would be if you were flying at a high rate of speed at level flight and there's a piece of terrain in front of you and you want to go over the terrain. Well, if you're flying at stable flight at a high rate of speed, your stabilator will be probably programmed between here and here, but it's not going to be here. But if you pull in that collective to get over that piece of terrain, or whatever reason you're pulling in power, the aircraft is going to send a signal to the stabilator that you're pulling in power, and it's going to go from being like that, which is what it would be in level flight, to being more like that. That way, when you pull in more power and cause more pitch in the main rotor disc, that extra downwash isn't going to cause the aircraft to pitch up like that, because it's going to be more streamlined with the aircraft. And that is the best way to describe collective coupling. The next one we're going to get into is a pretty easy one. So that's angle of incidence decreases as your speed increases. So again, my iPad is the stabilator, and it's programmed just like this at hover flight or low speed flight. So this right here represents your angle of incidence, right? The air is coming in and it is acting on the stabilator right in here, because the stabilator is more focused on the downwash at low speed rather than the incoming air. So as the speed increases and the pitot tube gets more air inside of it and the aircraft becomes more aware that it is flying at a higher rate of speed, it will start to decrease that angle of incident, and that stabilator will be more focused on becoming a wing rather than streamlining with the rotor downwash. That's the easiest way to describe that one. The next one is a little more complicated. So you have lateral side slip to pitch coupling to reduce the susceptibility to gust. Now, this one is mainly focused for when you're flying out of trim. So if you're flying along out of trim in our trusty little helicopter right here, and say your nose is canted to the left, the trailing edge of the stabilator will program trailing edge down, which will be more focused on streamlining with the main rotor disc, because in that left cant out of trim, there's going to be more pitch in the main rotor disc. If it's canted to the right, the trailing edge of the stabilator will be more up because it's less pitch in the rotor disc. So that is the compensation for the lateral. Next, we have pitch rate feedback, and this one is to prevent attitude excursions. So the best way to describe this one is if you're flying along in just a random helicopter without a stabilator, you get a gust of wind that comes in, hits you from the front, right? The nose is going to want to pitch up because of the environmental effects on the aircraft. You're flying in a 60 and you have the stabilator on the back. It's going to sense this environmental change on the aircraft. It will start to program the stabilator trailing edge down, which instead of causing that nose up attitude, it's going to dampen it because you have the trailing edge coming down, going from this to coming down. The wind is going to come in and hit it, causing a dampened effect on that nose up attitude. It's going to keep it more downward to stabilize and dampen the environmental effects on the aircraft. So that was the functions of the stabilator. Remember, it's scalps. Streamlines with rotor downwash, collective to pitch coupling, angle of incidence decreases as speed increases, lateral side slip to pitch coupling, and pitch rate. And that's it. If you know those 5 terms, that's going to get you through any table talk. Obviously, I went down the rabbit hole of explaining exactly what those things mean and trying to put them in the language of a common person. But if you know those 5 terms that scalp actually is, that's going to get you through any table talk. Now, there's no reason that an IP should give you a hard time about that. So if you have any questions, obviously, like always, leave a comment below. I am always, my inbox is always open to all of you guys, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and all of the support. Please email me or contact me if you have any questions. And again, I will drop the sources in the description below. Thank you guys, and have a safe flight.